Hey guys, and welcome on into the next NHL preview show. And today we're going to be talking all about the Dallas Stars, looking at their off-season additions and subtractions, coming free agents in the off-season, possible lineup, team future bets, player future bets, even some player awards. We're going to be going through it all here in the show. And to break down the Dallas Stars, I brought in Matt Rob 19. Of course, follow him on Twitter/X. His Twitter link is on the screen here and will also be in the description of the video. Matt, give people a brief introduction of yourself and yeah,
Yeah,
give people a brief
yeah.
introduction.
What's going on, guys? I'm obviously Matt Robinson, Matt Rob 19. Some of you that follow Terry might have seen me on the Ice Guys show with Ian Cameron and Alex B. Smith. Try and get on with them, once a week during the season. But yeah, Terry obviously invited me. He knows I'm the longtime Stars fan. We go back and forth on Twitter. Stars Wild rivalry doesn't stop when the season does. So all in good fun, good banter on Twitter. But yeah, excited to break down the Stars. Looking forward to another season where they've got, obviously some high points. There are some changes to the lineup, and we'll get into those as well. But definitely feel like they're, right back in the mix. As we saw last year, there's a lot of great teams in the NHL. So I don't think there's anyone that's a long shot favorite to win it all, but I think there's, six or eight teams that can get it done. And I do think Dallas is one of them. So, yeah, nice to talk to you guys and looking forward to breaking down the Stars.
Awesome. And yeah, the Central Division got just that much more tougher in the offseason. A lot of Central Division teams, except my Wild, decided to go and improve in the offseason. So uh, we'll jump right into the first segment here. I'll go first. Matt will go second here in this one. Additions and subtractions. Some teams have pretty long lists, like the Stars here, quite a bit of offseason moves. Other teams don't have so much, much smaller lists. Um, Looking at it here, just looking at the at both lists side by side, do think the Stars are taking a little bit of a step back here when it just comes to additions and subtractions. Luckily, the Stars have a lot of youth, so while they might be taking a step back here, they might not really take a step back overall. Chris Tanev was brought in by trade. Um, Obviously, didn't resign, went to Toronto. Ryan Suter was bought out by the Stars, which of course makes me kind of laugh seeing him get bought out again. But some subtractions are going to be additions by subtraction. And I think Ryan Suter is one of those. One of the players that I would not put in that category is Joe Pavelski. Of course, hanging up the skates. A great career by him. And his last few years here in Dallas, he didn't take a step back. Despite getting older and older, he still kept up that elite talent. Craig Smith is gone as well. Yanni Hakanpää, Scott Wedgwood, Derek Pilon, and then goaltender Matthew Murray, not Matt Murray, Matthew Murray here. So the big ones that the Stars are going to miss here is really Joe Pavelski. Chris Tanev was there for a few months, so I don't think it's the end of the world for him leaving. I think Ryan Suter leaving is a good thing. Additions, Scott Wedgwood is gone, so they bring in Casey DeSmith to kind of take that backup spot. I don't know anything about Matt Ellis, so I'm not going to really say too much about him or Max Ellis, sorry. But in the trade there, but probably isn't going to see any time on the Dallas Stars roster. Brendan Smith brought in to help shore up the D. Ilya Labushkin as well. Matt Dumba is maybe the prized offseason addition here. Dumba, of course, got into a fight with Matthew Tkachuk in a game against Calgary, playing for Minnesota. And it's kind of gone downhill since then, but he's coming into a really good spot here with a really good team in the Stars. Blackwell, bottom six forward. Magnus Hellberg, a third goaltender in case, obviously, goaltender injuries happen. So you always need a third goaltender. And then Kyle Capio as a depth defenseman, in my opinion. So really, kind of an even off season overall. I do think it's a slight subtraction, but we'll get to the possible lineup here later on. The Stars have a prospect that they believe is going to be making the team, so he could probably help fill a little bit of Pavelski's loss. Matt, addition subtractions, two kind of big lists here. What do you think about the Stars offseason?
Yeah, so I can start with subtractions as well. Obviously, Chris Tanev, great player for them down the stretch. He was only there a few months, but he definitely made an impact in their run this year, especially come playoff time. But at the same time, given what he ended up signing in Toronto for, I don't know if I would have I kind of see it as a wash. Of course, next season I'll miss Tanev being on the blue line. But 5 or 6 years from now, given how tough and how physical he is, how many block shots he has, I mean, it's going to be shocking if he's still walking in 6 years. So obviously hope him the best. He was a nice addition. He seemed like a good guy. I know one story I really liked about him was when um, and now I'm drawing a blank on who signed in Calgary from Dallas, the depth forward. I'm trying to give me a sec, but I'll get to the name here in a second. But um, Tanev, who had never met him, reached out to him and offered up his house, for this guy's time being in Calgary, which just kind of shows, the type of guy he is. Um, you know, didn't know the guy, just maybe it was a D. I'm trying to think. I don't know. It'll come to me, but it was a depth player for Dallas that ended up signing in Calgary after being waived. Um, just shows how good of a guy Tanev is. As you mentioned, Suter. I think obviously you're a Wild fan, so you like seeing Suter get bought out. I don't dislike the play. I think it was the right time. But I do think Suter played well for Dallas in the playoffs at times when he, played what he should have played. When he was being relied on for heavier minutes, he got exposed a little bit. His speed isn't, what it used to be. But I do think he helped some of the young guys, maybe with some of the being a pro, um, you know, tips of the trade, guys like Thomas Harley, guys like Miro Heiskanen, things like that, which rolls right into Joe Pavelski. I mean, nobody was better for the Stars as an organization than Joe Pavelski. We'll get into who they've got now in just a minute, but obviously there's a player that we both think is a great player. And I think he's as good as he is and will continue to get better because of Joe Pavelski. He's going to be missed. I'm happy he's retiring because I would hate to play against him because despite, slowing down a bit in the playoffs and, age is obviously not on his side. He was a great player in the regular season. He mentored guys, Rupe Hintz, Jason Robertson. A lot of times he played with them. He made those guys better players as well. So I know there's talks with the Stars about, bringing him down to practice once a month from Wisconsin just to be back in the locker room. And, Jim Nill will tell you how much value he brought to the team, and will bring to the team for years to come. I think Craig Smith, I liked him as a player. No bad things to say about him. He played his role well. He created a lot of chances. He obviously was snake bitten for a lot of the end of the season. It seemed like every game he had 2 or 3 breakaways and couldn't put it in the net. But, those depth guys are going to get moved around. He's sort of a voyager, journeyman, whatever term you want to use. But, he did what he was supposed to do while he was in Dallas. Hakanpää, at times was a good defenseman for the Stars, but I think it was time to move on from him. He's injury prone. He's a big guy. Obviously, he's Finnish, so he fit well in Dallas. They sort of refer to it as the Finnish Army just because of the connection with Lettinen and things like that. But it's probably time for him to go. Wedgwood, another one. I think Casey DeSmith is a perfectly fine replacement. I think they're pretty similar caliber goalies. I think Wedgwood wanted maybe a year or two longer term than maybe DeSmith was willing to sign, and I think that's why they ultimately went with Casey DeSmith. But hey, when Ottinger went down, Wedgwood, did what they needed to get some wins. Obviously, the team had to step up and score some goals as well. But great personality guy. I know Stars fans will miss him. The wedge wall. Hope him the best. I believe he landed in Nashville. Is that correct, Terry?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so he'll back up Saros this year. Another good team that did a lot of moves at the deadline, so good for him. Pouliot, he played well in the playoffs when he had to get pulled up. But I don't think he's like a big subtraction. I think he's replaceable. And then obviously Matt Murray, third string goalie. There's plenty of goalies out there, so not a huge blow to the team. As for the additions, I also don't really know anything about Max Ellis, so won't spend too much time on him. Don't see him, in the lineup much this year. He'll probably spend most of the season down in Austin. Casey DeSmith got to him. I think he's a great backup for Ottinger. Obviously, Ottinger's consistency is his biggest question mark. His ceiling is as high as any goalie in the league, or at least in the mix of those, top 3, top 5 goalies. But he's got to be more consistent. So hopefully Casey can take, 15, 20, 25 games this year in the regular season, so that Jay can go into the playoffs fresh. Brendan Smith and Lyubushkin, for that matter, I think are good depth defensemen, veteran guys. Lyubushkin brings a physical edge. Brendan Smith, I think he'll bounce around as like the 6-7D. When he's in the lineup, I think he's a good locker room addition. When he's not in the lineup, I think he'll be there for some of the young guys. I know we're going to talk about the one that you mentioned that might make the roster. I think he's got a good shot. My buddy played with him in Sweden last year for Rogel, and said he thinks he's NHL ready. He's, a good sized defenseman, could be similar to a Yanni Hakanpää, but maybe with a little more upside skill offensively. Obviously, biggest name on this list, or biggest career addition, is Mac Dumba. Obviously mixed reviews out of Stars fans. Some of them are still holding on to that hit on Pavelski a couple seasons ago when he was part of the Wild. I think if Joe Pavelski had re-signed with Dallas, they would have given each other a hug, and there would have been a big video about it. That it's playoff hockey, stuff happens. Was it a little bit maybe interference? I don't know. There's obviously slow angles that make it easier for us to see as spectators. But I don't think it was a malicious, like, trying to take out Joe Pavelski, from the series. But at the same time, Chuck talked about it. Montgomery talked about it in the playoffs. You are trying to wear teams down, and injuries do happen. And if, a guy like Joe Pavelski misses a playoff series, that's an advantage for the Wild at the time. So I really like that addition. I think, he had his ups and downs in Minnesota. He had some iffy play in Arizona, but I mean, Arizona defensively was sort of a dumpster fire. No goaltending last year. I think he may end up playing some minutes with Miro. He may be on that second line with like a Lindell or a Thomas Harley. But I think if Dumba's playing with Miro, he's going to have to not do as much as he's traditionally had to do. And I think people will see there is still some upside to him. He's not that old. I think he's 28, 29. But I think he can bring some physical edge. And I think that's something, Tanev obviously brought a little bit to Dallas, but I think that's something Dallas has been missing the last couple of years is sort of that physical play come playoff time. So I think it'll work out. I think he won't be relied on to be, a top 2D from a minutes perspective. And I think his game will improve from that perspective. Colin Blackwell, I think, a solid replacement for like a Craig Smith, a fourth line forward. He's played in the league. He's been on some up and down teams. He was obviously in Chicago last year, which similar to Arizona. Well, actually very different than Arizona. Arizona has the offensive firepower, but that was like an AHL roster a lot of the season. It's hard to really tell, how good he can be, playing a little above what, he should fit into on an NHL team. So I think when you see him on the fourth line with Dallas with maybe like a Sam Steele, guys like that, I think there's a good chance he'll be an effective player for Dallas, and again bring some veteran status to the locker room that's got some young forwards as well. Magnus Hellberg, don't know too much about him. He'll probably spend most of the year down in Austin, and then Kyle Kobe Capo Bianco.
Capo Bianco.
Capo Bianco, another guy that don't know too much about. I know he's slated to end up in Texas, so probably won't see too much of him, especially if things work out with Biscoe or Bischel. I've heard both. Ian always says Biscoe. I think a lot of Canadians say Biscoe, and then I think a lot of Americans say Bischel. So I guess we'll find out opening night if he makes the roster what Daryl Razor Ray says during play, because I think he'll probably talk to him and say, hey, how do you want your name pronounced for the league? So overall, to your point, I don't think they made any drastic changes. I don't think they, had a horrible offseason. I think it was just like an average offseason. But when you're back to back in the Western Conference Finals, less is more. I think they really have a good core. And so they just wanted to add a few pieces here and there, replace a Wedgwood with a guy that can play some games and things like that. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the offseason. And if there's anything that Dallas can hang their hat on, it's Jim Nill has done a good job the last 8 or 9 years. And so I trust his judgment. I think he'll bring in the right players, and then it's up to Pete to put the right lineups out there. So overall, I think it was a pretty good offseason.
Awesome. We will move on to the second segment here, upcoming free agents. You were talking a little bit about Ottinger having to be consistent. Other goaltenders out there, Jeremy Swayman, I'm hearing he wants 10 million a year. If he gets anywhere close to that, Ottinger is going to be saying, "Pony it up, Stars." So this is a big year for Jake Ottinger. Matt, what do you think? Upcoming free agents, quite a few names in this list. Some guys are going to be gone. Some guys will be back. Who do you want the Stars to sign? Who are the most important guys in this list, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think with Jake, we'll start in goal and go out from there. I think Jake is he obviously wants to be a Dallas Star. He's been happy with Dallas from what I've heard. Obviously, he's had a good experience. Some deep playoff runs, played with some good players. I think it's kind of a good thing that it's a sort of a RFA year for him, in the sense that he's either going to play lights out and give Dallas a chance to go the distance, and he'll get paid if they do, or his inconsistency will be there, and then that'll allow Dallas to sign him for more of a team-friendly deal. I don't disagree with you. If Swimming gets 10 million, he's going to be somewhere in that range. It just comes down to have guys rubbed off on him, guys like Matt Duchene, guys like Joe Pavelski that understand that it's a good team. Miro Heiskanen is on a pretty fair deal for how good of a player he is. Will he follow suit? He'll still get paid. We've talked about it off air. Texas does have the no income tax, so if Swayman signs for 10 million for a team in New York or Canada, Jake could sign for 8 and probably take home a little more money with not getting taxed on his income there in Dallas. But yeah, we'll see. It's kind of in his shoes, and I think that's a good place to be as a Stars fan, just in the sense that he's either going to get paid because he played lights out and they had a great year, or they're not going to have to pay him as much to keep him, or they can explore some other goaltending options. I think he's their guy for years to come. So I think he'll get what he asks for, but he's also got to kind of show it based on his play. So we'll see how the season goes. As far as defensemen go, obviously Brendan Smith is a big question mark. Will he have a good year? Maybe they'll sign him for one more year. He's an older guy. I could see him being gone like a 1 year and done. Obviously, depending on how things go, I could see a guy like that, if he wins a cup, signing for veteran minimum just to stay around with the team that he won with. But we'll see. I wouldn't expect too much from a re-sign with him unless he has a great year and has a couple more years that he wants to play. I think Lundqvist is a big question mark as well. I think they've sort of shown that they don't know that he's, the guy. He will be an RFA, so they'll obviously have first option to sign him. I think again, it's if he plays 60, 70 games and he, brings value to the team, I think they'll try and sign him. Um, for what he's worth at that standpoint. If he has another year that he's only playing less than half the games, I think he'll try and explore, maybe get an offer sheet, different things like that. But I don't think they'll go out of their way to sign him, especially if Bischel, ends up being a player. If Dumba has a solid year, Labuchkin, guys like that, if they don't need him, I don't see them like fighting to keep him, or anything like that. Maybe they even trade him at the deadline and try and get, a depth forward or something, depending on how the season's going. I think Lindell is, I would love to see him back in Dallas. He's another guy. He's part of the, Scandinavian mafia that Dallas seems to have. I do think he's a guy that, when he's playing well, he's a great piece to have. He kills penalties. He can play with Miro, he can play with Harley, he can play, with whoever. He's pretty defensively responsible. So I'd like to see him back, especially if he has another solid season. On the forward side, I think, Wyatt Johnston's a no-brainer. I think him or Miro is going to be the C, when Jamie Benn decides to retire or move on from being the captain. I know I was on with Ian and Ryan Garbett, and they talked about Jamie Benn and the type of player he is. He's one of the few captains left that has that full all around, will fight your fourth line left wing, but then also can put the puck in the net on the power play. So I think he's got a couple more years, but I think Wyatt, could fill in that C role at some point. I'm not worried about him going anywhere. I think Dallas will pay him whatever he asks as long as he keeps playing the way he's played the last two seasons. Bork, I think same thing. I think he'll get a lot of opportunity this year to play with the big club. And I think, it'll obviously be up to him to prove if he ends up not being able to play at the NHL level, which I really don't see, then obviously it'd be a different story. But if he has, just a solid first full year in the NHL, I think he'll be back. Blackwell, is a guy that is replaceable. He's older. He'd have to have a great year, and probably want to come back for a vet minimum type deal. I really like Sam Steele. I know he was a Minnesota Wild guy and then ended up in Dallas last year. He's another guy that gets a lot of chances. Maybe could bury a few more. That'd be nice to see, but definitely a reliable depth player, and he's younger, so I do hope they bring Sam Steele back, and I think he'll want to come back if Dallas has another good year. Whether that's going the distance or just having a deep playoff run, I could see him wanting to stay in Dallas. Dodonov, I don't think he'll be back. I don't even know if he'll play this season. I'm seeing like back and forth. He may walk and go back to Russia. I don't know. I like him. I think he's another guy that, in random games with injuries, plays with your top line, and then also can be a depth guy that scores a shorthanded goal in a playoff game. So I love him. I think he's been a great piece for Dallas the last couple of years, but I think he's getting to the point that if he does play this full season in Dallas, I think that's probably his last year. Duchesne, I think if Dallas has another good year, he's made it clear he likes living in Dallas. I know his family is enjoying their time in Dallas just based off his wife's social media, his social media. I think, he obviously had a bit of a rough go, the buyout, things like that, sort of sit in your stomach poorly, and Dallas kind of, obviously it was a great contract last year to sign him for what they did. But they kind of believed in him when he was down. So I think if they continue to have a good year, I think he comes back. I think he likes playing with Sagan and Marchman. So and they've got great chemistry. So would love to see him back. And then obviously Jamie Benn. I'd be shocked if he doesn't retire a Dallas Star. So I think he's a guy similar to Pavelski the last couple of years that I think will sign. He's made all the money he needs. He obviously had that big contract that at times was a question mark. But I think, the last two seasons, He's really proved that he's worth that money. I think there's a lot of intangibles that the average hockey fan, especially that doesn't watch Dallas all the time, may skip over. Oh, he's getting older. He's not as quick. But how he played with Wyatt, how he's played with Stankoven, I think those are intangibles that I don't see him going anywhere. And if they had a down year and he had the opportunity to go win a cup somewhere, sure. But I think, you know, just based on, how he is after they do lose, that um, the famous video of him in the locker room after the cup finals in the bubble against Tampa, the whole locker room's empty and he's still in his full gear. I think, being a guy that he was sort of an underdog, didn't make the World Junior team. Where would he fit in? Kind of went from the BC into the Dub, into the AHL, and then right into the NHL. Pretty quickly. And Dallas has always believed in him, and so I think he's a guy that I think he's a lifer star. I hope he is. He's been one of my favorite players, if not favorite player, the last 10 or 12 years. Because like I mentioned, he had his Art Ross year. Yes, it was a low Art Ross, point year. That's why he got his big contract. But, he's won an Olympic gold medal. He started out those Olympics as an extra forward and played the gold medal game on Crosby's line on the first line. Like, he just shows that he can kind of play anywhere. He kills penalties. He's on the power play. He's a great piece to have. So I would say, to recap, I think Ben, Duchesne, I'd like to see Steele. I think Bork and Johnston are both safe. I think they'll end up staying in Dallas. And then defensively, I think Lindell is the biggest of the three. I think the other two would have to earn it this year. And then obviously Jake Ottinger, I feel pretty confident they'll re-sign him. I think this year will be a big determining factor of how much they re-sign him for.
Awesome. I'm going to start with the forwards, and then I'll work my way. I'll go the other way. Jamie Benn. I have nothing but good things to say about Jamie Benn. Made me quite a bit of money last year. Being on that third line, you really got great value with his props. Like you said, playing with Wyatt Johnston, the chemistry those guys had, and from what I'm hearing, it looks like that they're not going to be playing together much this year, which is going to suck because they had great chemistry last year. As I said, I made quite a bit on Jamie Benn point at plus money, minus 105 type of deal. So Jamie Benn probably is going to sign quite a bit cheaper as well, as he said. So that's going to give the Stars a little bit of a discount money that's going to go to Wyatt Johnston and Ottinger. Matt Duchene, same thing. I don't see why he would really want to leave Dallas. The situation he's in, I think it's a pretty good one there. Evgeny Dadonov, that is the guy that you look at saying, we need cap to sign the other guys. So he's going to be a cap casualty. I'd be shocked to see him resign in Dallas. Sam Steele was good with Minnesota, originally a first round pick for Anaheim. So he did have that goal scoring in his younger days, but never really lived up to that first round player. But he is a good depth third, fourth line guy. Um, like gives his full effort. So he's a good guy to have in the lineup. Blackwell, as you said, totally replaceable. Um, if he signs for another league minimum deal, then Stars will keep him. But Maverick Bork, I don't think will get that big of a pay or that big of a deal, um, being that it's going to be his first contract after his entry level. So he should be signed at a pretty good price, unless he has this huge breakout year and then wants a bunch of money. But we'll see there. Wyatt Johnston, um, yeah, he's going to cost quite a bit of money, but he's worth every penny, I think, for the Stars. We'll be talking about him later on. The defense, Nils Lundqvist, I'm assuming you'd be able to sign pretty cheap as an RFA. Esa Lindell's been in Dallas forever, so it would be weird to see him anywhere else, but that's what happens in the NHL. Players leave, especially with young guys coming up for the Stars. Lindell might end up moving on. And then Jake Onger, RFA. Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised to see him leave Dallas either. Um, this year, as you said, will really determine. Maybe he only gets a 1 or 2 year deal. Maybe he gets the full 8. We'll have to see how he does this season. The next segment is possible lineup here. And yeah, when it comes to pronouncing players' names like Leon Bichelle, I'm going to say Bichelle. But no, for me, myself personally, I butcher names all the time. So it is what it is. But I like to hear announcers say the player's name. And then once I've heard the announcer say the name, that's how I pronounce it. So that's how I usually do it. But um, possible lineup. People in the comments every year give me shit about the possible lineup, and all I'm going to say is there's so many different combinations that you could have. We are over a month away before the season is starting, so don't get too mad if the lineups are completely different. That's why it's called possible lineup. But going with what the Stars depth chart looks like, Robertson, Hintz, and Wyatt Johnston could find himself on that top line. Mason Marchment, Duchesne, Sagan, as Matt was talking about last year, great chemistry there. No reason to mess around with that line. Jamie Benn, Logan Stankoven were great last year together. And Maverick Bork could be taking that third spot between those two guys. Maybe he's able to build that chemistry like Johnston had with those two. Dadanoff on the fourth line with Sam Steele, Colin Blackwell, and then a couple other guys trying to make the lineup here, and Matei Blumel and Antonio Stranges. So um, see how the forward lines look if you're right, and if Genny Dadanoff does go off to Russia or doesn't play or whatever, that will open a spot for someone else to come in here. The defense, Lindell and Heiskanen on that top pair, Brendan Smith and Dumba on the second one, Lundqvist and Labushkin on the third pair. And then you're saying good things about Liam Bichelle, so um, maybe he takes one of those spots from one of the other guys, and then Capobianco will be the uh, extra. If there's a bunch of injuries, then he would probably get called up. Oninger, starting goalie, Casey DeSmith backup. No goalie controversy here in Dallas, like some other teams might have. It's pretty set in stone here when it comes to the goaltending. Matt, what do you think about this lineup? What would you like to see the Stars opening lineup look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty accurate, especially up front. I think, the rumor is Wyatt will jump in and play with Hens and Robertson, which, I think those guys won't miss a beat. They've played together at times. I know there were times Pavelski dropped and played with Ben, during injuries or just when they needed to get some juices going. So I think that's going to be a pretty dangerous first line. And I think, adding Johnston's, let's call a spade speed over a Joe Pavelski, I think is only going to increase Rupe Hintz this year. He had sort of an up and down year last year, down, overall on his terms. And I think you'll see a big jump, bearing health and things like that, playing with a guy like Wyatt on one end. And then, Robertson's very lethal, obviously, scoring touch. I think that's a great line. I think you've got Wyatt that kind of will work. He proved he can battle in the corners. He pickpockets and then you've got Rupe with such good straight line speed. And then, you've got Robertson that's a sniper. So I think that's very likely the first line on opening night. I think Marchman, Duchesne, Sagan, I don't see that going anywhere. Talk about an uptick for Marchman and Sagan for that matter when Duchesne got to town. I think Sagan, after finally being healthy last season or 2 seasons ago, showed that he's back to playing a lot better hockey. But then this year, when he threw Duchesne on that line, there was chemistry instantly. There were a lot of points of the year that was the best line for the Stars when the first line was struggling. And I do think when you have that 1-2 punch, it opens things up for both lines because, if you want to hone in on that line, the Rupe Hintz line is going to have more opportunity. If you want to shut down that first line, then that Duchesne line is going to be ready to go. So I think it's a good 1-2 punch. I think it's likely Ben, Stankoven, and Bork start the year together. I mean, Jamie Benn's proved he's great with the young guys. I think that's a good line overall. Again, I haven't seen Bork play in the NHL a lot. I know he lit up the AHL when he was down there. But I think, you've got Jamie Benn out there sort of policing the ice. You know, Bork and Stankoven can play a little more loose because they know if somebody takes their head off, they've got Jamie Benn on the ice with them. I think Stankoven proved he's a workhorse. So I think that's a really solid third line. And then, yeah, if Dodonov does stay, I think that, it's a very similar fourth line to what they had last year. Because again, I think Blackwell, Craig Smith are pretty interchangeable. And then you do have a couple of young guys that could fight for spots here and there, with injuries, get some time up in the lineup. But I think opening night, forward wise, I think that's pretty spot on. Defensive wise, obviously the big missing piece is Thomas Harley. Everything I've seen, there's no real stress from either side. I think they'll get a deal done before opening night, which is why I think, Thomas Harley and Lindell played together really well down the stretch when Tanev was playing with Miro. So I could almost see it being Miro, Dumba, Harley, Lindell as your top two punch. And I think Miro, obviously plays the biggest minutes of that group. He can play a shift with Harley here and there. He's out there for the full 2 minutes on the power play all the time. So I don't know that Dumbo will play like first line minutes, but he'll be out there with Miro when he is on the ice, which I would like to see. I think he'll get, I think he'll look like a lot better player when he doesn't, need to be the stay at home D or, covering for the other. I think Miro is so good. Like the big joke is like, I've always been a forward. I'm not very defensive, but like I could play a shift with Miro and probably not stick out because he's just so good. So um, if that's the case, then you've got a good problem to have because then you've got Bischel, Lundqvist, Labushkin, and Brendan Smith all fighting for that third D pair. And competition breeds, the best in people. I would think that it would probably opening night be Labushkin and Brendan Smith. But Lundqvist has been there. Bischel is, potentially going to be an opening night guy. So again, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I would like to think that Labushkin is definitely one of them, and then I think it's more between the other three. Just based on he's been playing in the NHL, he's played decent minutes in Toronto. I think he's a big physical presence. But it'll be an interesting camp. Again, that's a good problem to have. I think there's 4D that could be your third pair, and two are going to be there. One is going to be in the stands, maybe two, and one might be, in Texas, in Austin, with the Texas Stars, and then so we'll see. But yeah, I feel pretty confident that Harley will be in that mix as well, which will only add to value. You could even have Harley up with Miro because they've played together, and then have Lindell with Dumba. That can kind of interchange, but I think those are locked in as your top four. And then I think the other four are battling for those last two spots. In net, yep, I don't think there's a big question mark there. Who's one and who's two? It's no 1A, B in Dallas, but the hope is Casey DeSmith, will play some consistent games, some lower end teams, some road games, some back to backs, things like that. I think if he can play, 20, 22 games this year, it puts Dallas in a really good spot to be fresh going into the playoffs.
All right. Yes, I totally forgot about Thomas Harley. There was nowhere to really put him on the screen here. That's why he's not on here. We are filming this on August 28th. I will not be shocked if he gets signed before the show airs because that happened last year. Um, Teams like to do a lot of deals have been or a lot of signings and stuff have been going on recently here in the end of August. So don't be shocked if we see things change before the show even airs. But as of now, he's not signed. So we'll see how that goes in the coming days heading into the opening season. Future bets, the main segment I think people are looking for here. Of course, um, Dallas is one of the contenders for the Stanley Cup when it comes to odds, overall win total, all of that. They are considered one of the top teams in the NHL. For me, When it comes to the odds here or bets that I have, when it comes to team future bets for Dallas, I don't have anything. I'll be honest. At this moment, I am betting more futures this year, but I'm not going crazy. I do have something when we get to the player future bets that I like though. But when it comes to the team future bets, um, if I do pull the trigger on Dallas to win the cup, it'll be during the season at some point. Win the conference, plus 550, not bad odds there. President's Trophy, I never bet a President's Trophy bet before, and I don't really wouldn't really want to, because you're basically picking a team to finish first in the regular season and then flunk out in the playoffs. So I wouldn't want to do that to anybody. Win division plus 230. This I think this division is for the Stars to lose. However, Nashville really improved in the offseason. Colorado, it sounds like Landeskog could be making a debut early in the season. They're hoping um, they're hoping to get I'm blanking on his name. Um,
Nichushkin.
yeah, they're hoping to get him back as well during the season. So the Avalanche are still there. Um, it's a tough bet for me to make for the Stars to win the division. I do think that they have a very good shot at it, but at this point in time, no play for me. Make playoffs. If you're betting a minus 600 future, well, I don't really know what to say. And I don't really have any positive things to say, so we'll just skip that. For Dallas to miss the playoffs, plus 425, yes, it's a nice plus price, but it would take catastrophe, I think, for the Stars team to miss the playoffs. Point total 103 and a half. The Stars had 113 last year. So um, their point total is dropping almost 10 points, which is kind of interesting. I know obviously they're losing Pavelski, but don't know if he's worth 10 points in the standings, but we'll see. 90 plus points, 100 plus points, there's no value there. 110 plus points if you think the Stars are going to have a big season. Like I said, they did have 113 last year. So if you think they're going to match what they did last year, you could get a much better price with the plus 170. Least points in the NHL, that's for other teams. Obviously, I would not bet that, but to each his own. Matt, what do you think about the team future bets here? What do you think about them?
Yeah, that least points. That's kind of a cool thing to do with your own team. Like throw $5 on it, and what would that be? $800 on a $5 bet just to see how things go. But or no, I guess sorry, $200. I don't know. I'm probably missing a zero, maybe 2,000. I don't know. But anyway, I think it would be $2,000, right? Plus 40,000, five
I'm
dollars.
not even sure. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
I think it'd be like $2,000. But anyway, that would be an interesting bet. Just game one, like your goalie and your first two lines all get hurt, and you're like, well, but no, not a ton. I would take here. I said the same thing on the Ice Guys preview show. Plus one, plus 1,100. Not good enough odds to take my favorite team. Obviously, I hope they win the cup, but I would almost take them mid-season if they start out the year 4-8 and just aren't quite gelling yet. I think they're definitely a team that's going to be in the hunt. So maybe you get them down to plus 2,200 and then throw a little money on them, but probably nothing on that front. I do think they have a great chance to win the division, but to your point, that Central Division, especially those top 3 or 4 teams, are pretty interchangeable, and it may come down to the last week or so of the season. There might be guys battling injuries, waiting to come back, and it would be a shame to lose that by like a point because the Stars sit 2 guys that are big name players just to rest before the playoffs. Maybe they whoever's coming up the wild card like this season is Vegas, and you're like, we don't need to get this win and play Vegas when we could play, Nashville or Winnipeg or whoever it ends up being. But I think make the playoffs. Yeah, I can't imagine making a minus 600 bet, waiting 82 games for it. The only one that's I feel good about is that 103.5 bet. But again, typically if I'm betting a futures bet preseason, I want a lot better odds than minus 115. It's kind of just like, throw $100 to win $94, and it's like I gotta wait all season for it. So I do think they've got good potential to hit that mark. I didn't realize they were at 113 last year, so that is quite a big jump. Again, I know Nashville improved a lot, and they'll play them what 4 times. So, but I just I'd be surprised if they don't sniff last year's record because I think they're a pretty similar team, and some of the young guys, the Stankovens, Wyatt's got another year under his belt. Like you'd think that they would improve. So, um, no real value on those 90, 100, 110. Again, it's a nice piece, but plus 170 isn't really, selling me. And then last but not least, the least points in the NHL. What are I obviously you prepped these for every team. Like what is like a Chicago, a San Jose, like just an idea of like ballpark on what they are for least points? Because that's an interesting bet that could be kind of fun to take like 3 teams and just like hope they finish dead last.
Yeah, there's the last year they have obviously different things, but last year they had this team to have more points than this team, which was really interesting. You had like Montreal and Chicago as like a matchup, and like Dallas and Colorado would have been a matchup and that kind of thing. So they have different things each year um, at DraftKings, which is the book I used here. Of course, other books will have different things as well. San Jose is the favorite at plus 180,
Mm,
Columbus plus 360, Anaheim plus 450, Chicago plus 650, Montreal plus 900. And the one I'm looking at, I don't want to spoil it for a future show, but it's going to be it's going to be right at the end. The team that I'm looking at is Calgary at plus 1600
mm.
um,
Yeah.
to be the worst team in the NHL. So there's some teams there. Obviously, Dallas, not what team I'd be looking at, but um, there are some teams to look at. If you think Sharks plus 180, I don't know. I don't know. I think the Sharks are going to be better this year. So we'll be talking about them later on in the season. But yeah, there are some teams you could look at if you're interested in betting that. Um, we will move on to player future bets here. And I'll just kind of quickly talk here about what these players have done in recent years. Robertson, when it comes to goals, 29 last year, 46 the year before, 41 the season before. So Robertson did have a down year last year, 29 goals, but the previous 2 seasons hit 40. So now you're getting him at 35 and a half, which could be a good look. Point total, 89 and a half. He had 80 last year, 109 the season before. 79 the season before that, didn't play a full season. So no plays there for me. Hints, 30 goals last year, 37 back to back years before that. His totals at 32 and a half, 72 and a half points, 65 last year, 75, 72. So not a lot of value there. Johnston goals, 32 last year, 24 the season before that. His point total is at 72 and a half. He had 65 last season, 41 the year before that. So you can tell, and he had 41 in 82 games played, and then last year 65 in 82 games played. So a 24 point difference in 1 year, um, just by obviously playing your second full year. Now he's coming into year 3, and if he is going to be on the top line here, 78 and a half points, I like him over 78 and a half points. It is minus 115, but with these player future bets, you're basically getting minus 115 on each side. But yeah, I would go with Stankoven points, 78 and a half. The goals, he had 32 last year, 36 and a half. I don't know though. If Robertson shoots a little bit more this year, I could see Johnson racking up assists, and I could see it's tough to bet the goal. So I would go with the points for him. Stankoven had 14 points last year, only in 24 games. Now his total's at 45 and a half. Heiskanen, uh, 54 points last year, 73 the year before that, 36. So Heiskanen's been all over the place when it comes to point total. Ottinger wins 34 and a half, 35 last year, 37 the season before that, and 30 the season before that. So when it comes to these bets here, I would take Johnston over 78 and a half points. And I would potentially look at Onger, 34 and a half wins. Both of these guys are on, both these guys are getting a new contract. They're on expiring deals. So they're going to be motivated. So I would potentially look at both of those. I do like Johnston over 78 and a half points more. And I actually may end up pulling the trigger on that. So that's a bet I really like. Matt, player future bets. What do you think about these totals? Does anything stick out to you here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that I definitely like a lot. The one thing, you know, guys like Robertson obviously had a down year last year on the goal total. They're big. The big, I don't want to say motto or message from Dallas last year was, it's not about me, it's about the team. And so I think you saw a lot more spread out. Again, you've got the top line, you've got that Sagan line, Ben's line was chipping in. So it was a lot more, they were beating teams 4-1, but four different lines scored goals. So where maybe the year before they were really relying heavily on that Pavelski, Hintz, and Robertson line. The two things that I love on this list, and one of them, sounds like your favorite, is the Johnson, 78 and a half points. I think, playing with those two guys, I think it's inevitable. I don't know where he'll slot in, but I would like to think if there's good chemistry there, he'll jump on the power play with those two as well. I know he played a lot of second power play last year because um, they still had Pavelski. I think Ben or Sagan was on the first line sometimes, and then obviously Miro sort of runs the point, and a lot of times ends up out there with both. But they do have Harley on PP2 sometimes. I like that a lot, and I really like Hint's point total. I don't know if he'll have 33 goals. He obviously could. Vegas is pretty smart with these things. It's usually pretty damn close, which is crazy, thinking of an 82 game season. But like I mentioned, I think he had a pretty heavy down year last year, some inconsistent stretches. He had some good points. He's definitely a streaky guy. He'll have 4 points in 7 games, and then in 3 games, he'll have 8 points. Like it comes and goes. But I think just given the type of player Johnston is, I think it's inevitable that his points will go up quite a bit this year. So those are probably my two favorites. I think if Robertson ends the year with 35 goals and 89 points, it's a solid year for him. You know, so it's tough to really, but I could also see him having 45 goals and maybe 98 points. So I think there's reason to take a lot of these. Like I shouldn't say reason to take. I think there's arguments for a lot of these overs. But the two that I like the most are Johnston. He's looking for he wants to sign a long-term deal. He's a guy that I don't think you need to waste time on a bridge deal if he continues on the trajectory he's on. Um, he does it all. Plays he played the second most minutes for Dallas in the playoffs, which is shocking for a forward. Like, obviously Miro is playing like 30 minutes a night, but Johnston was up there like 22 minutes, 23 minutes in some games that didn't even go to overtime. So I think he'll have a lot of opportunity to get some points. But yeah, I think that line is going to take a step forward with him. And again, that's nothing against Pavelski. I think it just brings some youthfulness. They already have some chemistry. And then Johnston trying to push for a good year is only going to help increase those other guys. What did you say Andre finished at last year wins wise? I know he was out for about 10 games, 10, 12
35
games.
last year and 54 games played,
Okay.
37 the year before that and 62 games played.
I I could see that overhitting. Again, I don't know if I would, I know all of these pretty much end up at minus 115. I don't know if I would bet it just, in case there is an injury at some point. That's what unfortunate with the goalie ones is it's like this past year I had a point bet with my buddy, just not off Vegas odds, but it was a Bedard point total, and had he not broken his jaw, it would have easily surpassed, and it missed by like 2 points because he was out for a stretch. So it's like, especially with like wins, if Andre misses 20 games this year to injury, like that's an impossible bet to hit. So definitely something to think about. But if he stays healthy, I could see him with 40 wins. If he ends up playing 60 games, to think that he wins 2/3 of the games, with a good team in front of him, I think that's very possible. But those are always a little scary to me. But I think Johnston, he's sort of learned from Pavelski. I'm hoping he's an Iron Man type of guy that just plays 82 games this year. I think him getting 78, 79 points is very, very possible. So I think that would be the one I would take number one on this list. But I also really like that Hintz total just because I think, he needs to prove himself. I think, there's people that argue he's like a Barkov type player and, just needs to get more consistent. I think with those two guys on his side, I think you could see Hintz, have a breakout year. I don't think he's ever going to be like 110 point guy, but I think he could have 90 points and no one would be shocked. So, at 72.5, I really like that one as well.
Awesome. Yeah, he had 65 points last year. So in a
Yeah.
down year, 65 points. That's still really good. 30 goals in a
Yeah.
down year. That's pretty good. One more segment to go. Some shows this is all one player future segment. This one, of course, with Dallas is a lot of bets, so to split it into two. These are not minus 115. So if you're looking for bets with some more value, that are these ones here. Matt, I'll let you go first. Of course, none of these might actually stand out to you, but some might.
Yeah.
What do you think here about these bets?
Yeah. I think, there's a couple here that have some potential. I think Andre being in a contract year, that's when a Vesna happens. If he signs next year for 8 years for 9.5 million, then I don't know if you take Vesna because he's got that long-term longevity. But if he's really gunning to have the best year of his career this year, I think he's in that mix of 5 or 6 guys that I think have potential. So that's decent odds. I think Heiskanen will or should win a Norris at some point in his career. It's just tough. I mean, you've got guys like McCarr, Quinn Hughes, Fox, the list goes on. There's a lot of guys that are in that mix. So plus 800 doesn't really stand out to me. Would I be surprised if he wins the Norris next year, if he has a great season? Not at all, but I would just need a little more juice. Like, if that was plus 1500 or more, maybe I'd take a shot at it. But yeah, I think he's definitely a Norris caliber player, but there's a lot of guys in that mix. Bork to win the Calder, those are great odds. From the Ice Guys show, I hope Josh Stone has a great year, even though I'm not a Utah or former Arizona fan, but he's a buddy of mine, so would love to see him win the Calder. I think Stankoven's got a chance because he still comes back as a rookie. Obviously, you've got Celebrini, you've got I forget the guy's name in Philly, the Michnikov. Uh,
Mishkov, yeah, magic.
he's obviously supposed to have a big year. So, but I think plus 3,500, maybe throw $10 on it. See if you win a couple $100 if Bork comes out and plays like he did in the AHL last year. That'd be awesome. Hence again, sort of like Miro, not quite high enough, but I do think he's a Selke caliber player. And if he does have a 85, 90 point season, I think he's got a chance to be in that mix. But there's a lot of great players in that mix. And then with Pete DeBoer, I do like that one a lot because if you think Dallas has potential to win the President's Cup, President's Trophy. I've been watching a lot of golf lately. My boy Taylor Pendrith is right in the mix to make the President's Cup team, so I'm hoping he does. President's Trophy, if you think Dallas has a good chance to win that, then I think after 2 Western Conference final seasons and then a President's Trophy, I think, maybe another team has a big shocking year and there's other guys in the mix, but I think that's a very possible Jack Adams Award winner. and plus 2,200 is pretty good odds. So I probably won't jump on it, but if anyone watching is very confident in Dallas, again, I am, but it's also hard to bet with your heart because I also am a huge fan of the Stars. But if you're not a Stars fan and think this is the year they win the cup and they have a great regular season, then I think that's a great bet, because he's obviously been in that mix. And if they, since it's just based on regular season, if they win the President's Trophy, I think, I don't want to say it's a lock, but I think there's a very good chance he wins. And plus 2,200 is pretty good odds.
Awesome. Heiskanen, shockingly, plus 800. He's tied with Quinn Hughes and Adam Fox and Evan Bouchard. They are all
Okay.
tied for second at plus 800. Kel McCarr is plus 250.
Hmm.
So if you're looking at
Which
Norris bets, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, which again, I never want injury on other players, but like let's say McCarr goes down with injury, then Heiskanen's right there in the mix. So yeah, I guess when you look at it that way, that's pretty good odds.
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit surprised that they were all kind of tied here. Bouchard, obviously, the books love Edmonton. We'll be talking about them in the future. Hughes, Fox, Heiskanen, all tied. I don't have any bets here when it comes to the player future bets for Dallas. Um, Dallas is a team I'm going to be looking at for player props during the season. Not so much when it comes to um, future bets here. Um, the Calder, I love that you brought up Josh Stone. I'm not going to say too much because that'll be a show upcoming, but lots of value with Josh Stone to win the Calder. I'll just say that. But I love your play there on that. And yeah, some nice plus money here. Nothing that I'm pulling the trigger on. DeBoer, you brought up some very good points about DeBoer, Jack Adams. The other teams, Sheldon Keefe is the favorite, plus
Hmm.
600. Brunette, plus 700. Craig Berube, plus 850.
Hmm.
So definitely some other options there. If teams like if New Jersey has a big year, uh, then it'll be Keefe's to lose. But that's it. That is the Dallas Stars preview show. Matt, thanks for jumping on. Everyone, give Matt a follow on Twitter. His at MattRob19. And then, of course, it'll be in the description below. Thanks for coming,
Awesome.
Matt. And thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Terry.